them. So,
All good.
all right. Okay, I think we are in good shape here. Sorry, just getting my screen centered. All right, perfect. Ready, Mike?
Go.
Okay. Greetings, innovators and leaders. This is AI for the C-Suite, your compass for navigating the exponential age. I'm Chad Harvey, and we're here to bring you cutting-edge insights on AI tailored specifically for middle-market organizations. Buckle up as we embark on a journey through the transformative world of artificial intelligence. I'm very excited today to welcome our guest, Mike Gadsby, the co-founder and chief innovation officer of O3 World. Mike leads digital transformation initiatives with a unique focus on the intersection of AI, user experience, and creative problem solving. He's worked on cutting-edge AI projects, helping businesses leverage AI to transform their operations and relationships. With extensive experience in both leadership and creative fields, Mike brings a wealth of insights on how AI can reshape industries. Today, we'll explore his journey, touch on some key projects, and talk about where AI is going and how it impacts the C-Suite. Mike, welcome to AI for the C-Suite.
Awesome. Thanks, Chad. I appreciate you having me.
You bet. Now, Mike and I connected a few weeks ago, had a brief conversation that could have gone probably 3 times as long. So this is going to be an excellent discussion today, packed full of very useful tidbits and information. And I think we're going to have more questions and dialogue than we have time to fit in. So we're going to jump right in. And Mike, why don't you tell us about your journey into the world of AI, how you've seen it evolve in recent years, where you think things are going? I'm going to leave it very broad, but kind of give us your background and what got you engaged in this.
Sure. So my background is in user experience, customer experience. I run a digital consultancy here in Philadelphia called O3 World. We've been around almost 20 years this May. And we sort of grew up with the internet, right? When we started out, designing a lot of Flash websites and, just giving people a presence on this newfangled thing called the internet.
It's a fad. It'll pass.
It'll pay, right, exactly.
Right.
So I'd like to think that we've always sort of been on the cutting edge, right? Like we've always sort of been that next step for organizations to figure out what spaces they need to be involved in, that, quickly evolved into things like social media, that quickly evolved into just digital being, central to kind of everything organizations are doing. But our focus has always been around the experiences we create through the digital channels. And really using digital as a way of, making people's lives better. Our background, and I think you'll see anybody who sort of does a little homework on O3, is very much human-centered. We have so many people here who have either degrees or have taught and created curriculum on human-centered design in some capacity or another. It's really how we solve problems. We work a lot with either innovation groups, marketing groups, technology groups on really helping them first and foremost understand the problems that exist with the humans they engage with, whether that's their outwardly the customers or we do a lot of work in healthcare patients maybe that they engage with, or internally with say employees, workflow automation, that sort of thing. And then we really help to define those problems and then really come up with a digital solution and a way to solve that. Practically, it's, apps and websites and a lot of portals and that sort of thing. But over time, that has become more and more geared towards data and personalization and ways in which we can really effectively create experiences that are, somewhat invisible to the user. Fast forward a few years, I would say about 10 years ago, we started really in earnest getting involved in AI, obviously more around machine learning, but it was really to empower those experiences. I go back to a talk I gave in 2017 about the future user experience and talking a lot about, how do we create, this perpetual personalization, right? How do we create, this like environment and world where, I'm constantly being delivered exactly what I need, when I need, and how I need it. And that seemed pretty futuristic at the time, to be honest. I mean, it was funny talking to a bunch of people there who were, involved in these like big personalization platforms. And they're like, yeah, that's definitely where we want to go. But man, we need a whole lot more data to make that work. And I think that was really the kicker of it, right? It was cool, very interesting. Man, you needed such big data to make any of it work. And then even when you got it, it was kind of like maybe half the vision, right? Fast forward to kind of where we're at now, I would say in the last couple of years in the sort of rise of generative AI and the world we're in kind of currently, all of a sudden it's at our fingertips. All of a sudden there's so much in front of us that I've been dying to do forever. All of a sudden, you know, chatbots don't suck anymore. All of a
Right.
sudden they're like, you have these like we don't even like using the word chatbot. We actually have like real deal virtual assistants where I can hold a conversation, where I can mold that conversation, where I can train the technology like I would a sales rep or a customer support rep, providing that insight and opportunity. And that's really the world we're living in now. It's really helping organizations figure out how they take advantage of AI and the technology to really solve those problems, create great experiences.
I'm glad that you started out touching on the human component and the experience that you're looking to create. That is something that I think gets lost in many of the conversations, especially with techno enthusiasts about this technology. And my position, I may have even said this on this podcast once before, is that this technology, in my opinion, has the ability to make us more human, not less human. And it has the ability to deepen and further and strengthen the relationships that we have with each other by taking a lot of very routine, commoditized stuff off the table. But then as we get into higher levels of AI and their applications, which in many ways is still a little theoretical, but the theory is just around the corner in many instances here, I think we're on a very exciting journey right now. So I was really happy that you started with that. I want to drill a little deeper on the personalization piece because ethical concerns abound out there regarding AI. And a lot of people, especially the general public, when you start to talk to them about personalization, they start to push back a little bit. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Yet on the same token, they love it when Amazon can deliver them something in 48 hours or less based on their prior buying history that they are already running out of. So there's this real interesting balance between I see what I want, but yeah, I don't know, I'm a little creeped out about that. And how do you navigate questions like that with your customers and your clients?
It's a transaction of value,
Mm,
right? Like I'm going to give you my data and you're going to give me an awesome experience.
hmm
What I think is interesting now, and I'll be interested to see what happens over the next, say, decade, is the ownership of that data. So when the value no longer exists, can I get my data back?
mm
Right.
hmm
That's an interesting concept. I think when blockchain came out, that was sort of a really interesting component of blockchain that I was interested in. I think reality is that the technology was a little too complex for people really to grasp. But I
hmm
do believe that, you see it in the statistics over and over again. People want a personalized experience, but people just want to make sure that you're being careful with their information and providing them just what they're asking for and not doing anything more than that. And I think that is no different than a relationship that we have. You were talking about it human to human, right? If I meet somebody and we're on the level and they're honest and clear with me about their intentions at all levels, and we can call it a personal relationship, a professional relationship, whatever the case may be, then I'm going to trust that person. And then I'm going to likely want to work more with that person or want to spend more time with that person or want to create a deeper, more sustainable relationship with that person. When they begin to take my trust and erode it by not being completely transparent with me about what they're doing, that's when things start to fall apart. And I think that comes back to really human aspects of how you approach these problems. We talk about it all the time with organizations around things like mission, vision, values, right? Those things are just as important to AI as the problems you're trying to solve, as the technologies you're trying to implement, all of those things. Because without those in place, you really don't have a really strong foundation for the human relationships you're trying to develop through the technology. So I think it really, again, I say all the time, AI is not like it's listen, most transformative technology in our lifetime. I will absolutely admit, and certainly in the work we've done, and certainly the most transformative since I saw the iPhone come out, really, and then mobile just changed everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this is so different, right? But I'll say it's still just technology.
Right.
It still requires that, we still have, smart ideas, that we're solving real human problems, and that we're being good to one another regardless of the technology. So I think that's really the sort of foundational factors that we consider.
I think that's a great way to frame it. And one of the things that occurs to me from your remarks just now is the question of shiny object syndrome, right? You mentioned that this is just a technology, and I absolutely agree. The question is, how do you frame your conversations when, say, someone shows up on your doorstep tomorrow and they're like, hey, we got to get in the AI game. We've got this great business, and I know we got to be ahead of this. And you're like, all right, well, hey, let's pump the brakes. Where do you start then with that conversation?
Honestly, the same place I started 10 years ago,
Yeah.
which was, what problem are you trying to solve, and who are you
Yeah.
trying to solve it for, and
Mm-hmm.
why, right? Again, and all of our approach to this, especially being human centered. I mean, these methodologies didn't come around. It's funny. I'm a big fan of like the Stanford, D school, and like all of the methodologies that came out of IDEO and all that stuff, right? Like a big fan, right? I mean, it,
Sure.
it really, helped to drive a lot of our philosophies for the work that we do. Reality though is like that stuff's cool, but that stuff's been around for about 100 years or so, right? Like people have been solving problems in a very similar way for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on how you look at it, there's nothing, wildly new about the foundational aspects of this. But that you are still approaching the problems in that same way, that you are still being concerned about, the individuals that you are trying to engage with. More often than not, with the people we're talking to, it's in two areas, right? Especially if we're talking to the C-suite. It's either on the customer side of the house or the employee side of the house. It's either in how am I going to produce a better experience to create revenue opportunity, or how am I going to create efficiency so that my team can be more productive,
Mm-hmm.
create better ideas, create better insight, whatever the service or product may be, right? And in both of those cases, it's really behooves us to understand who the individuals are, what they're experiencing on a day-to-day basis, and really where are those friction points, right? Where are those points where they are either tripping up or spending too much time, they're not getting enough work done, or I would say we're not unlocking enough of their capabilities, right? And
Right.
on the internal side, but even on the customer side, right? Man, all I want to do is I want a customer to come to any of the clients we work with, even our own clients, and just be like, man, that was great. That's all I want them to do. I just want them to
Mm-hmm.
walk away feeling really positive about the experience, right? But in order to unlock that, you have to unlock a little bit more of their own engagement, right? There, and in any sort of interaction, you're going to get out of it what you put into it, and the same goes with that customer engagement, right? But it starts with really understanding like what's keeping us from getting there. How do we sort of remove those things, and then how do we use the technology to kind of get us over the hump?
Right. So you touched on a really important point there, and I think no great idea ever comes out of a vacuum. I think sometimes they arise simultaneously, and I mentioned that because you touched on driving revenue or essentially enhanced profitability and driving efficiency. And I came up with the idea, I don't know, a few months ago about, all right, well, most of the folks that I'm working with, they either want to increase profitability or they want to enhance efficiency and productivity, or they want to do something totally novel. Then, of course, I saw Ethan Mollick post something about that, and the guys over at Deloitte, they've got a cute little bullseye. I was like, okay, well, I guess other people have come up with this idea too. So when we're talking about what the clients want and what they're looking for, have you had any engagements yet where they come to you and they want not just the efficiency or the revenue, but they want the novelty piece, right? Are you doing any kind of blue ocean stuff there?
For sure. I would say, though, one of the things we definitely push clients away from is novelty for novelty's sake.
Hmm.
I gotta tell you, I think you see this all the time with organizations who just invest a fortune into these solutions, and what they find is that they're just kind of spinning their wheels. And we've been on both sides of that equation, right? We've helped clients really come up with something that is novel and new and interesting, and we've also seen clients kind of spin out and burn out. It just
Right.
happens. Some part of business. And what I find is, the ones that are just trying to do something different and new and interesting without that focus of, again, being problem centric, it becomes a little unclear as to like the steps you need to take in order to get to the solution. I'm just a big fan of just grounding all of the solutions in some sort of data or insight to help us understand how we're successful. But I also think that's where you find the real novelty. I really
Mm.
believe I was on a panel with a gentleman from Google a few years back, and he had this great thought, and it just stuck with me since then. A UX leader in the product group, and he said, I truly believe that innovation exists in the experiences between the experiences.
Hmm.
And I loved it. I loved it. I was like, man, like that is so true. Like we think about like the handoff of your relationship with any business, and you think about like what does that actually look like. I even think about like the iPhone was
Mm.
fundamentally, think about it. I mean, we put a little computer in people's hands,
Right.
right? I remember, do you remember the first like the browser was
Oh
like
yeah.
was just all it did was just load a website in like a little mini browser, and then you had to like
Yeah.
pinch and move things around to like go get to
Right.
it. Right? And like that was a step in the direction because what we wanted the internet in the palm of our hands, and they did that.
Right.
But then, like, think about all of those little experiences that happen because of that. Then all of a sudden, they change the entire aspect of the internet. You started getting things like responsive websites so that I can
Hmm.
actually read the content. You started getting like concepts like accessibility, like the fonts and colors were more available to more humans throughout, right? I
Hmm.
just think that those are the real sort of novelties. Those are the things that really sort of make experiences new and unique to people are really when we start to look at those little spaces in between the spaces, and we can really kind of blow them up from there. So it's a
Careful,
long
Mike. It sounds like you're veering into Marshall McLuhan territory there, and the medium is the message.
That's right, to some degree. To some
Yeah, that's great. Um, let's go a little bit deeper on this. You said a couple things there that made me want to ask you about how you view the AI ecosystem. Right now, we know there's a lot of different ways that we can slice and dice this conversation. We could talk about kind of the 5 levels of AI that OpenAI and ChatGPT have published and are driving towards. There's a lot of different ways that we could frame this conversation. So I'm going to deliberately leave this open-ended for you in terms of how do you view and assess the AI ecosystem? Where are we right now? What's next? Where are we going? How do you view this? What kind of lens or filter do you apply?
Yeah, wow, talk about a loaded question.
Yeah, right.
Lots to
I
unpack
just
there.
gave you enough rope to hang yourself.
Exactly. So okay, so let's back up and just sort of like it's interesting. So it's the end of the year, right? To timestamp this, it's
Yep.
in fall 2024, right? We're doing our planning for 2025 as an organization, and one of the things we're constantly looking at is what does our 3-year plan look like?
Right.
And I got to be honest with you, this is the first
Mm-hmm.
year, well, maybe last year, but like we're now at a point where when I'm trying to think about what does the next 3 years look like, I'm actually like my brain's sort of like spinning. Like if I'm thinking about like what does the actual future of everything look like, and I mean everything,
Mm-hmm.
like that associates with the businesses that we're doing. Like we have been more or less, taking incremental steps in certain directions with the work we do over the past, again, almost 20 years. I truly believe in the next, 18 to 24 months, we're going to start to see some huge steps in some big directions with, how people sort of engage with technology. Some of the manners and methodologies with which we expect the technology to really drive us forward, and I believe that that is where a lot of the future of AI sort of exists. Is, if I'm being honest, it's unwritten right now. I think
Mm-hmm.
people are still trying to catch up,
Yeah.
to these general concepts. I talk to businesses all the time that are like, it still blows my mind, but like, so what's this chat GPT thing? And like, listen, fine.
Yeah.
And by the way, when I say that, I don't mean like small mid-market businesses. I mean like big enterprise organizations where, you have some people who should know better.
Uh-huh.
It always sort of like makes my eyes pop out of my head a little bit. Um, but because of that, what you're going to see in my mind is a huge disparity between sort of those that kind of got on the cutting edge and started to recognize that this wasn't just a matter of, using new technology. This was a matter of retraining your staff,
Hmm.
building new roles within your organization. This was a matter of reassessing processes and procedures from the ground up and to start to see like, okay, well, maybe we don't need to do that anymore because we can just focus on this thing over here because that just took too much time and we're not really making any money. And now we can just automate everything and we can just move in this direction. So I do believe that, and it's a little bit of a vague answer, but I just because I just don't know. And what I'm seeing over the next few years is just such a transition.
Yeah.
I do think that a constant steady state of iteration, learning, understanding, and revising those plans is necessary. I think that, you know, technology investments need to really be sort of balanced with really continually understanding what needs and desires look like within organizations. And I think that's really where, the path to success lies with any sort of AI strategy or implementation. I think from my perspective, not on a personal level, um, it's funny. This is sort of like me sort of unpacking a little bit of a secret, but like I have found myself actively trying to be less engaged with technology because of all this.
Hmm.
And it's just because it's in my face constantly. I mean, and now it's my business, it's our business, right? So I
Right.
should be sort of on top of it, but I'm finding that because of it, it just feels like I'm just constantly being inundated with it. My hope is that AI starts to unlock, and you sort of mentioned this up front, but more human experiences
Right.
that we are able to engage more now with one another. And I'm less locked into a screen than I have had to been, in years past. I think things like voice controls, I think things like the idea of what a virtual assistant looks like now for people on a day-to-day basis. I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
Everybody has a virtual assistant to help them do their job on a regular basis. Like
Hmm.
that's reality. That's already happening. We have co-pilots, we have ChatGPT, right? We're doing it in probably in a very minimal way right now as I see it. But imagine that. Imagine like I'm going to go in and I'm going to sit down in a chair and I'm just going to start talking. And things, or maybe I have screen, or maybe we have 3D models that start to build in front of you, whatever the case may be. But like to me, that's really where you're going to start to see what that level of insight looks like. People getting back to like collaborating in virtual spaces and just having that conversation with the AI is just a central role for creating that conduit between the individuals. That would be cool.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, that's a future that I'm kind of excited about, versus, just helping me sort of sort out my spreadsheets on a regular basis.
No, well said. And I love that you started with the fact that you're engaged in planning, looking out 3 years. I've been in and around strategic planning for almost 3 decades now, and I've been building plans for organizations for about 15. And over the last, well, let's just call it since we entered the 21st century, the strategic planning timeline went from like, okay, we're going to build a 10-year plan. Now we're going to build a 5-year plan. Now we're down to 3 year. I won't personally work with an organization if they want a plan that exceeds 36 months because, to your point, it's so opaque right now and things are changing so rapidly.
Yeah. Well, all the more reason why, as I said, what we've advised our clients on isn't just the plan, but the process with which you assess and revise that plan on a regular basis.
Yes.
Quarterly is probably a bit much, but certainly, twice a year. I mean, to
Right.
really look at what's happening and where those investments go and really making sure that, it still aligns with what your customers need and want and your
Hmm.
employees need and want. All that said, that can sound a bit daunting. And yet, as I say with my clients all the time, what a time to be alive,
Yeah.
like talk about like, I don't remember when the internet came around and I felt like I was coming out of college. Man, did I hit that just at the right time? And I was like, man, I felt like I was in the Wild West. Like you could
Yeah.
do anything, you try anything, and it was great. This is a little different and feels a little different because it's a little more all encompassing and the internet was sort of considered, as you said, a fad, right? Like at the time, and this is not a fad. Like, and
Hmm.
I think people recognize that and they recognize the transformative nature of it. But I think if people keep a positive attitude, and I know this sounds like, I don't know, all of my like all of my business models are all from like sports and coaching and whatnot, right? Maybe this sounds like a little bit of a pep talk before a game, but I think people literally keep a positive attitude about what's possible.
Yes.
Don't find themselves sort of sucked into the mud of the negative aspects of this. I do believe we can sort of map out a future that is beneficial and that people can take advantage of. I think as long as we sort of accept the fact that like things are going to change,
Mm.
everybody's like world is going to change in some capacity. People embrace that, regardless of your job or routine, and understand that you don't have to lose your job because of this, but
Right.
your job is going to change
Right.
fundamentally. I don't care what job it is, it's going to change. Like, and I think there's a future there where everybody can benefit for sure.
I'm really heartened to hear you focus on that positive vision of the future. I know you speak to audiences about AI, as do I, and I inevitably get what I call the Skynet Terminator question, right?
Totally.
Yeah, I think the first time I ever spoke to a group was about 200 folks. Someone stepped up after the talk to the mic and said, "Do you think AI poses an existential threat to humanity?" I'm like, man, that is a little bit above my pay grade here. But to that point, I think that we've been programmed in many ways from 40, 50 years of movies and science fiction to go to the negative. We also, of course, as a species, have a negativity bias, right? So we're leaning into what makes us feel good internally, at least. But I do agree with what you've said about focusing on the positive and thinking about possibility. And one of the things I always like to remind folks is what's not possible today with this technology may very well be possible tomorrow, next week, next month, or next year, right? So keep those things in mind. One of the things I wanted to ask you, since you channeled the specter of Web 1.0 there, I remember being in college. I remember seeing my very first browser in '92 or '93, and it unlocked possibility for me. I could see what the future held. And in many ways, I think my experience, I like to joke, I built web pages for beer money in college, right? And in many ways I did, but that's another story for another time. But what that HTML experience did for me was allow me to see where things could go. And it showed me the bones behind what we were all looking at.
Yep.
And I think that there's a lesson there in terms of how we work with AI today. I think that folks that for the last year, two, three, have been experimenting and playing with the different systems that are out there, seeing what one can do versus the other, leaning into different types of interfaces and multimodal applications. I think that experience is going to serve all of us very well going forward because it grounds us, right? It grounds us in where we began. And I know I'm asking a very big question here, but I'd be interested in your take on that grounding element and how important some of the experimentation and the training is for, say, your standard issue office worker or knowledge worker right now. Be interested in your thoughts on that.
I do believe awareness is the number one challenge that we're up against. And if I could just comment on the Terminator scenario.
Please.
Um, to your point about being pre-programmed to the negativity, like, why does the technology have to kill us at the
Right,
time? Like,
right.
we're creating a future that all of a sudden we believe is going to destroy us. Like, why? Like, it
Right.
just drives me nuts. I'm like, that is a self-fulfilling prophecy if I've ever heard of one, right? Unnecessary. And I've said this for years. I'm like, there's 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 all sorts of movies where the robots help,
Right,
right? And
exactly.
they're actually like assistants and they get us to the finish line or they help us achieve whatever the heck we're supposed to achieve. Like, I just look at it and I'm just like, I just don't get that. But I
Yeah.
think that fear of what we don't understand is at the
Hmm.
root of a lot of the concern that happens in the world. And I think that is in the sort of irony of AI in the current state is it's more accessible now than it's ever been. I was speaking to a group of education leaders not too long ago at an educational conference, and it was on a panel, obviously on AI. We're talking about AI in education, and I mean, we're talking school district leaders, superintendents, all sorts of folks, all over the country, and you know, in this room, let's call about 100 people in this room, and all like there was a lot of like energy around, like, wow, kids cheating and this is gonna take us off course of a lot of the progress we made over the years, blah blah blah. I asked a simple question. I asked the room, I said, how many of you have used ChatGPT or something similar?
Mhm.
I want to say maybe 35, 40% of the hands went up. Now you could look at that and be like, all right, it's a third to a half. I looked at it and I said, that's a problem. And that's a problem because you're all leaders.
Right.
And you're all asking me questions. And I'm telling you, like, you could go answer some of those questions in the next 15 minutes. If you just go sign up for a free account, sit down with it, understand it, and then we can come back to the table and have a more informed discussion. Now, that isn't to say that some of the fears and conversations that we were having weren't grounded in some realities, and I think there are some realities that we have to be very concerned about. But I also think that that awareness and understanding is where this all starts. Unlike, I went back to mobile. Unlike a mobile experience, which was the people, but like I said before, was basically taking some of the things we had already known and sort of just putting them in the palm of your hand, and then just the nature of how we interact with it a little different. All of a sudden now we're expecting people to do their jobs different, right? Like I think about tax accountants, right? Somebody who's in spreadsheets all day, every day. They've worked hard to build those macros that sort of do all the functions, and they have all the things they do on a regular basis, and they've done that for years, and they don't want any of that to go away because they've sort of mastered it, and that's their knowledge base, and that's their value, right? Now all of a sudden we're saying to them like, well, you don't need to do any of that. You can go ask a copilot to go build all those things for you. You just have to tell it what to do.
Right.
All of a sudden now it's like your job isn't so much to write the macros. Your job is to be thoughtful about the information you're looking for and how you want to move it around and move through your day faster. That's a fundamental difference in how they're working. But it starts with understanding, okay, what can I do with this thing? Right. And it starts with like being open-minded and positive about the fact that, no, this is going to help me during my day and not going to take my value away. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's such an important factor. Right. And so, especially when we're talking organizations, a big part of AI strategy is employee awareness, employee empowerment, and essentially change management when it comes to helping people sort of understand, what's possible. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying that, like, I do think that individuals learning and being more change-minded in the fact that these things are going to evolve will just help everybody on a more daily basis.
I'm glad that you used the word value when you were talking there in terms of what folks are used to doing, and I think it's both a sense of value, but also personal accomplishment, right? There's this idea out there that we train and we get all this experience and we gain mastery of this subject, and all of a sudden, the mastery is less useful than what we can do with that mastery, right? How can we create additional value by understanding that we don't need to know every jot and tittle anymore? We just need to be better editors or better versions of ourselves where we look at the output. It's kind of like I like to use the example of a law firm and a partner and an associate, right? You're never going to just send the associate's work out the door as the partner without double checking that if they're working for you on a case. It's the same situation here. You don't necessarily need to know all of those nuances anymore, but you've got to be able to sniff out what's right, what's not right, and then figure out, okay, what does my role look like going forward?
Yep. It's not a shortcut to thinking, and it's not a shortcut to work. And I think that's the challenge with a lot of this is that people think that, okay, I'm just going to sort of press a button and my work's going to be done for me. That's not the right way to think about this.
No.
The right way to think about it is to start with, what am I trying to get done and how am I trying to get it done better, faster, et cetera? And what does that mean for me as an individual then to continually do my job? But, there's the story of I don't know, it was the lawyer. I forget what he was in, and sort of, tried to write up a brief that and they found out that half of the case law he was commenting on was not true, right? And what a sort of silly, dumb way. Like to me, that says to me, you don't actually want to do your job on a day-to-day basis, right? And that is the difference here. I think it's like, no, you still want to do your job. You just want to do your job better, right? And you just want to do it well. It doesn't change the fact that there's still, to your point, you're still going to need to go, look at all this stuff. You're still going to need to get in the weeds. Now you can use the technology to help that, remove some of tediousness of the work you're doing, but you still got to go do the project. You still got to go do the job. And I think that's really where, I think it benefits organizations to think in that direction. And it's not
Hmm.
about, okay, how am I going to put this technology in place to remove a tedious task? It's okay, then I'm going to do that. But then what does that mean for the individual as far as the work they're going to have to do? How does that change? And then what do the expectations look like?
Right. And I think there's some real exciting opportunities we're getting glimpses of right now to enhance your ability to check the work, whether we're talking about iterative refinement, right, which is a great buzzword right now, especially when it comes to the new Chat GPT o1 preview, which is kind of a preview of their reasoner model, or whether you're using iterative refinement techniques in XML prompts with Claude. Regardless of that, I think we can start to see glimpses of how we can train these systems to be more critical of their own output. Just an easy throwaway example. Sometimes I pit Claude versus ChatGPT in kind of a poor man's adversarial network, right? Double check this, make it better, da 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 da, going back and forth. But as these systems, to your point earlier in our conversation, are on and they're listening and we have voice interaction with them and they understand who we are, what we do, what our company or our organization is all about. I think that's opening up possibilities where the checking of the work is going to become both, I think, easier as well as better. And it's going to allow us to elevate our game. That's where I see a lot of this going in the near term.
Yeah, I agree. Bots working with bots is basically the general idea. And, we're doing that as far as conversational experiences are concerned.
Mm-hmm.
One of the real concerns with creating any sort of knowledge base and then having the LLM sort of, leverage that for, whether it's a customer support scenario, documentation, exploration, whatever the use case happens to be, is accuracy, right? And is,
Mm-hmm.
the concept of, hallucinations, where it's, the generative AI is that it wants to generate a response, right?
Right.
It wants to be, that it's encouraging itself to do certain things. So having to create the checks and balances there is really interesting. One of the things we've done is this kind of concept of a gold standard
Mm-hmm.
data set, and then having essentially the LLM rate and reflect on its responses against that gold standard so that it knows and can say, well, how did I do? If this is true, and I know this is a fact, how did I do in my response against that fact? Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting way of sort of making sure that we can double check or triple check kind of the work we're doing. Now, if you add a human element, which we do, into that mix as well, now you're like 3 levels deep on accuracy, efficiency, expectations, right? And then you can start to get into things like not even just checking accuracy, effectiveness. Now you can start to get into like the quality, right? Like
Right.
now we start thinking about like debates, between a human and a couple bots on like, is this good enough? Is this the best thing given the scenario that I'm in? Am I producing the best possible content? I think there's a lot to that, particularly in the world of we think about content marketing, right? I mean, how many
Mm-hmm.
blogs are flying out now that are just being auto generated by ChatGPT, right? Ugh.
Yeah.
I don't like reading these blogs to begin with. I'm a very much a TLDR kind of guy. Like, can you
Right.
bullet to the top of the post so I know what I'm getting into? I just want to know what I'm investing my time in.
Right.
I
Yes.
really appreciate when like you get like a McKinsey and they have like the summaries at the top, and then I know like how far into this thing I like. It's all right. It's gonna take me about 10 minutes. Is this worth my time and energy? Let's see. But I do believe that you're going to see a transition at some point away from a lot of that because that junk is junk, and
Yes.
where people are going to want to see more quality content. But imagine you have somebody who's a real deal journalist and really wants to understand the effectiveness and the impact of what they're writing, and then has a bot or some series of bots that's basically looking out in the world and saying like, all right, I love your point of view on this. So and so has a point of view on this. Have you thought about taking maybe a slightly different direction here, or maybe an idea is to sort of look at it from this perspective, right? Wow. I mean, then all of a sudden, you can get through these like conversations and these sort of push and pull on the content in such a more meaningful way. And that's using the AI for creating more value, right?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to just kind of doing the job.
Oh, absolutely. There's a great study out within the last week or two. I'm still working my way through it, but it focuses on EQ and it focuses on kind of self-assessment scales and scoring using these large language models. And basically, there are frameworks. You can even use zero-shot prompting in there to get some feedback on your active listening skills. And I think the implications for that, and I'm tying it right back to your answer about marketing. I think the implications for that and the personalization are profound, absolutely profound.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, on that note, I think one of the things you'll see though is a world where, and again, going back to marketing teams and whatnot, where this idea of putting, I actually think about it in the terms of like maybe even consultants or doctors, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have, a handful of opinions, personalities, and ideas that sort of sit in the middle of these conversations that, you and I are having right now. We can put like the AI, who is the AI expert with this point of view, who believes in these things, maybe is the contrarian in certain aspects, blah, blah, blah. I just think the push and pull of that conversation and the detail that you can kind of create therein is just super interesting. And I do believe that that's a space for us to grow in
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit. I've actually seen a handful of products recently and been pitched a few things that are somewhat similar, various different industries that do exactly that. Because time is expensive
Yeah.
and people's ideas really need to be sort of thought through and sort of battled a little bit. So.
No, that's well said. With respect to projects here, and maybe this will be one of the last areas we unpack, what is one of the more exciting projects that you're working on right now, or what is one of the more interesting products that you've been pitched and that you've seen demoed? So you can kind of take your choice there where you want to go with that.
The most exciting thing that I would like to see happen with a project that we're working on in the next year is I would love to see. So we're doing a lot of work with virtual assistants,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's kind of bread and butter. We do a lot of things in like summarization and data and insights and all that. And that's awesome work. I have no issues with that. I'm dying to see the transition where all of a sudden we're taking AI and we're putting it into more physical human environments
Mm.
where I'm going to go have a conversation, whether it's an avatar or something on the other end, whatever.
Right.
Every brand is a little different in how that works and you use it. I do think there's something about like the uncanny valley and like creepiness factor of some of these avatars and whatnot. Conversation for another day. But voice to text to conversation to LLM to create exactly what you and I are doing right now in
Mm-hmm.
a physical environment to create knowledge, to maybe have that debate that we were just talking about, to really start to create this sort of more human environment where the technology is all of a sudden, maybe it's a screen, maybe it's not, but definitely not a keyboard, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden now we're talking about really having that sort of, human to bot interaction in those spaces. I mean, that was the vision of science fiction forever, right?
Right.
That was Hal back in the day, although Hal maybe a cooler version of Hal, right? Like,
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
exactly, exactly. But to me, those are projects that are on the table for us right now.
Yeah.
And those are, areas and opportunity. And maybe the use case currently is something more like trade shows and,
Mm.
real spaces where people can sort of engage with these things, but they're still on the table. And there's
Mm-hmm.
still those things that are just so interesting to me because now all of a sudden the way with which we are exploring information, I'm going to go to the website and go look something up kind of, conversation type thing is totally different. I'll
Mm-hmm.
say that's kind of the big bucket. I'd
Yeah.
say maybe a little bit of a smaller bucket therein and something that like, and maybe it is a big bucket. I don't know. I think the nature of how we engage with information on the internet is going to change immensely. I think you're already seeing it, right? Like you're already seeing with search results and how people are using AI to go look things up and all this, right? And so a lot of these patterns from a user experience perspective, we sort of followed for years are now all of a sudden shifting quite a bit because I can ask a question, get a response, right?
Right.
But think about that from a point of view of like you're going to go to Amazon, you're going to order a product. All of a sudden, and it's funny. I always said I think the most lucrative user experience decision ever made was the one-click purchase, right?
Mm.
There is more dollars attached to that decision and that technology and everything that they sort of attach to that, just about anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now we're in a space where that might even become unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The idea that I'm going to go to an app, go to a website, I'm going to say, I need this when, or more importantly, I'm going to open that app and the app's going to go like, all right, I think I know what you need today. And like, here you go. Like, those are really interesting sort of experiences. And we're kind of whispering about it right now with clients. And we're kind of having those conversations. Like when they're like, we do a lot of website work, we do a lot of app work, and people are talking about, well, we need to do this and we need, and I'm thinking, and I'm like, all right, you're making a pretty big investment, maybe a 2 to 3 year investment on this thing. Where are we going to be 2 to 3 years from now? Bringing it back to the front of this conversation,
Right.
right? Like, is that really the experience that you're going to want to be delivering, or do we need to start thinking about this maybe 2, 3 steps ahead? There's a really interesting conversation there as well that like I'm excited to start getting into that work.
That's fantastic, and I'm glad. And for listeners here, I'm going to draw this through line, right? So we started, and one of the things that you gave as a very early example was the iPhone and the touchscreen, and I think that's a perfect example of how the way we use technology and systems and interact with information rapidly changed, and we are at again another rapid change point. And I love the ability to have guests on this show where they've got their fingers on what's going on, but they can also see what's next. And I think everything that you just summed up over the last 3 or 4 minutes there is spot on. So if I can give you any kind of endorsement, you've got the seal of approval. I love the way that you're framing this and thinking about it. Spot on, Mike.
Okay.
So as I said at the beginning, our time together was going to go very quickly, and we try not to have one of these podcasts that goes 2 or 3 hours, and I think that you and I probably could do that very easily here. It wouldn't be a heavy lift. So maybe I can have you back on another time as the technology changes, maybe like 2 weeks from now or something.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
And
Last week.
yeah, exactly. But this was a fantastic conversation, and I really appreciate you sharing all of your insights with us today. So as we wrap up, what's one final piece of advice that you'd like to share, or maybe a question even I didn't ask you that you wish I had, but what's something that you'd offer up to C-suite execs that are exploring everything that we've been talking about here today, Mike?
I know this sounds super like dad did like my kids, so I don't need to either, I don't mean to sound, patronizing in any way, shape, or form here, but keep learning.
Yeah.
I think, more now than ever, I feel like it is imperative, and I mean this for all of people, not just business leaders, but most especially business leaders who have influence over their employees and their lives, et cetera. I mean, it is important that organizations continually evolve and create systems that sort of embrace that evolution. That has nothing to do with AI. That is just a perspective and a philosophy that needs to be sort of embedded into organizations now. It's, listen, everybody wants to like build that product that makes them, bajillion dollars for the next 50 years. The world doesn't work that way anymore. It's funny, and someone asked me recently, like, who's going to be the next blockbuster, right? I'm gonna be honest with you. I would be floored if there were a lot more blockbusters out there because people and businesses have to evolve so regularly now. You can't sit on your heels and just expect the dollars to roll in. You have to make change, and you have to have processes and procedures in place that change occurs somewhat seamlessly without a lot of disruption to your sort of core business, right? So learning on a continual basis is huge, but also creating the processes to sort of embrace it and take advantage of it, I think is just as important. On that point, if I can,
Please.
one of the things that we do with that is really provide a lot of insight for individuals. I think, doing continual things like lunch and learns and that sort of stuff are really important. One of the things that we developed is a conference around the 1682. I think I mentioned it, a while back to you. I think there's something to be said for making sure that you're continually bringing people together to have these discussions. less so in a virtual environment, more so in a physical environment, to make sure that they're having sort of real great discussions. That conference, which is in October this year, is a great way to start around the Philadelphia area. But I would say even the thing I'm seeing more than that's worked for us more than anything is bringing a group of individuals together around a space. So call it information technology leaders or design leaders or healthcare workers, healthcare people, right? And putting them, call it 8 to 10 people, putting them in a space and having these discussions and shared experiences, I think is critical. We've seen it be so effective and so impactful on the whole that you start to see, okay, well, I've been using it for this reason, and you've been using it for that reason. And as much as listen, we get brought in to be that sort of knowledge share, I'm finding more than not, we're now the facilitator of that sharing. Because how so-and-so is doing that work on their day-to-day, routines. Like, I don't know, I'm not the one sitting there doing the work. People are having to be novel in how they're approaching this stuff on a day-to-day basis. So embracing that and learning from everyone around you, not just from the world in general. I just think it's so important. And I think that's a place where you really find those novel ideas that you were talking about before. You really find those, new inventions, and then really help to create business environments that are truly going to be successful.
We are at the end of our time, but I would be remiss if I didn't say to our listeners, if you kind of tuned out or were playing with the cat or you were on the road while you were listening to this, go back 15 minutes. Mike just outlined for you what your roadmap is if you were paying close attention, and how you need to be thinking about this technology and what you need to be doing with your people and in your organization. I think it was a mindset, it was a roadmap, and there was tremendous value there. So thanks for that, Mike. That was awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, Chad. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, absolutely. For those that want to learn more about the work of your organization, that want to get in touch with you, or maybe want to sign up for your conference and learn more about that, how do they do that?
That's great. So the company is o3world.com. So that's the letter O, the number 3, world.com. O as in ozone, not the number. And then the conference is 1682conference.com. 1682, for anyone who doesn't know, was the year that Philadelphia was founded. And we are very much from Philadelphia, although we have people all over the country. We take a lot of pride in being from Philly, and especially as a leader in democracy and learning and experiences. We really, there's sort of the basis for leveraging the 1682 number for the conference. It's all about innovation and AI, and most especially it's about shared understanding of real world applications of AI. As I just mentioned before, I mean, this work has to start with people sort of learning from one another, and really starting to map out what the sort of future looks like in short order. So it's a great place for anyone who's in and around the Philadelphia region to go get to know each other a little bit and learn a whole bunch around AI. We have speakers in all sorts of industries and talking about all sorts of topics, but the fundamental sort of connecting fabric is what's working and what's not, and really helping people understand everything from risk and regulation to how it impacts customer experience to we got a closing speaker from Google, John Flynn, who's fantastic, who speaks about this stuff all the time, speaking about what does the future look like in a positive light. So hopefully some of those things I was saying before about avoiding the robots, destroying the world, he'll help to shape some more information there for everybody. So once again, 1682conference.com, and then it's o3world.com.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing that, and thanks for all your insight that you shared with us today. This was absolutely fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you again for having me. Wonderful conversation. Would love to do it again, as I said, in a few weeks.
It's a date. All right. And for all our listeners out there, thank you for tuning in to AI for the C-Suite. We are committed to helping middle market leaders thrive during the exponential age. If you found value in today's discussion, be sure to subscribe to our podcast, follow us on all the socials, and visit our AI community and learning platform, AIforthec-suite.com. Until then, join us next time as we continue to unlock the potential of AI for your organization, and be sure to keep your algorithms running, your leadership evolving, and your AI in check. Take care, everybody.